Over the past year, it's been especially difficult for workers who either temporarily or permanently lost their jobs due to the pandemic. Many were just getting by before COVID, struggling to pay their bills and keep a roof over their head. Millions of Americans have been unable to pay their rent for months, and landlords who have their own bills to pay are also hurting. To help keep many in their homes, Congress approved $25 billion in emergency rental assistance in December, and has now approved another $22 billion as part of the COVID-19 relief package that just won final approval in the House this week. The United Way, one of the nonprofit agencies helping people deal with the effects of the pandemic here in the North Country, says the threat of homelessness is one of the biggest challenges many people are facing right now, a year into the pandemic. And there's concern it could get even worse in the coming months.
The Plattsburgh Housing Authority oversees 601 units of public housing, another 191 housing choice vouchers, and then another 20 VASH vouchers, which are designated for homeless veterans. So we house, all told, roughly 7% of the city of Plattsburgh in our housing programs.
There's a nonprofit affiliate organization called Plattsburgh Community Housing, which is developing the Atlas Heights project over on the former Air Force Base near the Seton Catholic building. The affiliate is not only developing that project, but has started out with and continues to work on smaller units, duplexes, triplexes, and some other housing opportunities. We're always looking for, through that affiliate, an opportunity to find housing that can be either a temporary shelter for people who would otherwise be homeless, or just providing low-income housing, additional units in the city and also beyond the city.
Despite the efforts of the Plattsburgh Housing Authority and other nonprofits and affiliated groups, Mark Hamilton believes that there is not enough affordable housing in Plattsburgh and the surrounding area.
Every community has their own sort of housing issues. The city of Plattsburgh, for example, there is housing issues, there's housing instability, there's challenges. There's been a lot of new development in the city of Plattsburgh, which is great, but a lot of those units are more expensive, and they can sometimes drive up the price on some of the other units that aren't maybe necessarily in as good of shape or as new or have been maintained as well. I don't believe there is enough affordable housing, but I think more to the point is that the housing stock in Plattsburgh isn't appropriate. We have 191 vouchers in our Housing Choice Voucher program. We used to do 191 inspections a year. So everybody on the program had their apartment inspected every year. And if something didn't pass, if there was a health and safety issue, whatever that was, we'd have to re-inspect. And we'd have to re-inspect until it passed. And I believe this number was from 2017. We did almost 400 inspections. So that's a lot of having to go back to apartments to re-inspect because things weren't passable. Right? There were health and safety issues. That tells me that not only do we have a lack of affordable housing, the housing that we have that's affordable isn't being maintained properly. There's so many households in our area that live on that sort of precipice of financial challenges, even though they're employed, even though they're working. You add a couple of kids, you add healthcare, you add these different costs, transportation, daycare, all these things, and they're one situation away from being homeless. I mean, literally being homeless.
Nationwide, the United States economy has lost nearly 10 million jobs since March 2020, mostly due to the pandemic. Job loss can come with the threat of homelessness, but in New York State, there is currently an eviction moratorium. So New Yorkers who rent are generally protected from the threat of homelessness. Currently, there is no timeline for that moratorium to be lifted, but there is growing concern with what could happen once the moratorium is eventually lifted.
From a procedural standpoint, we don't really know what that is going to look like when the courts are more fully open and these moratoriums are lifted. We don't know if it's going to be phased. We don't know if the court is going to, what the limitations are going to be as far as the number of cases that they hear. It's really hard to say because it's just an unknown.
We're in the middle of a pandemic, so people are less likely to move, right? Don't want to move. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so people don't want to move to congregate type settings where they have, close neighbors or they live in a senior high rise. And then on top of that, you have the eviction moratorium, so those people that typically would be going through an eviction process and be looking for housing aren't. So at this point, the Housing Authority's wait list is smaller than it has been in quite some time, and we're having some challenges filling certain units. What we're afraid of is that once that eviction moratorium lifts and the evictions begin, we're afraid that we're going to see a huge influx in applications. We're not going to have, housing units available for these folks, and then they're going to either be sitting on a waiting list or they're going to be designated as homeless. Our housing is affordable because it's based on the household income, but it's limited, it's finite. There's only so many units, and as our units get filled, there's no units left. A lot of what may happen in the city and in the surrounding area is as landlords have dealt with this eviction moratorium and they've dealt with non-payment of rent and they've dealt with these situations for the last year plus, they may reassess their portfolios. They may decide that they want to invest some money into apartments and be able to get a higher rent. And as they do those things, they're basically taking affordable units out of the marketplace, right? I mean, they're changing the dynamic of what's available. And so I really believe that we could see not just a wave of evictions, but the outcome from that being a wave of families that don't have affordable housing available to them.